Dear friends, if you were asked to enumerate dangerous things, would you, for instance, mention among them concepts? Concepts are not innocent of what is happening in our world. Concepts become dangerous when their content, though obscure, is taken for granted. I am afraid human rights have already become a dangerous concept. A new example of this fact is herd community, that certain states use as a way to fight against COVID-19 pandemic. This way is nevertheless a violation of the right to life, also, but first of all, of the right to health. What are human rights? When we take a look at their names and the existing classifications, things appear quite confused. In various international documents and in various constitutions, we find as categories of the fundamental rights, civil rights and social, economic, cultural and political rights. And under these categories, various rights and freedoms, some different and some in common. Reading these documents, some questions arise concerning the fundamentality of some rights. On the other hand, some demands which could be considered as fundamental rights are not found in these documents. What could be used as a criterion in revising our lists of human rights and also in determining new rights? A criterion which would not leave too much ground for dispute concerning the fundamentality of some rights. The systematic knowledge of the potentialities of the human being acquired by means of the achievements of the humankind, and a clear knowledge of the conditions securing the ground for the actualization of these potentialities affords us the criterion. A criterion to distinguish the fundamental rights from the non-fundamental ones, which altogether form an indivisible whole, but because of their different connections with human potentialities, have different implications. This knowledge, backed and justified by this counterpart, that is, by observations showing how these potentialities are blunted today, not only affords us the criterion to distinguish which kind of demands are and which can be fundamental rights and which not, but also open for us a way to become more and more aware of the implications of the essence of the fundamental rights. Human rights are rights of the individual, but all the rights of the individual are not human rights. Now, when we look at the rights of the individual using the criterion proposed, we notice that though with respect to each individual they are interrelated and form an indivisible whole, as demands, they show some remarkable differences. A part of these demands is connected directly with human potentialities, another with the preconditions necessary for their development in general, while another part of them is connected with certain changing conditions. I am inclined to restrict the term human rights to the first two kinds of demands, and to include in the concept of human rights the interdictory demands concerning the security of the individual and or the so-called fundamental freedoms, as well as the demands related to the preconditions of the protection of the human potentialities. Rights such as the right to health, the right to education, the right to work can be given as examples. The demands of the first kind are directly connected with the exercise of human potentialities. What they demand is that individuals be not hindered while exercising activities proper to the human being only. So, the respect for these rights appears to be first of all an ethical question. The role of the state with regard to these rights is, or expected to be, to prevent violations, and in case of violations, to re-establish balances. Rights such as liberty and security of the person and its implications, that is, no one shall be held in slavery or servitude, no one shall be subjected to torture or cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrests, and freedoms such as the freedom of thought, freedom of opinion and expression, freedom of peaceful association, fall under this category of rights, which are demanding from everybody to do not harm to the value of the human being. The so-called fundamental freedoms are the legal guarantees of these rights of the individual. They are there in order to guarantee that nobody touch an individual for any reason, while this individual is engaged in actualizing a human potentiality. Put in a legally valid document, they guarantee the possibility to be demanded of everybody, but they do not guarantee the respect of these rights, unfortunately. These rights constitute one part of the human rights in which all human beings are equal. Where these rights are respected, there the related freedoms exist. People enjoy these freedoms. Where they are not, there prevails insecurity or anarchy and terror. This was one group of rights. There is another group of rights in which all human beings are equal, fundamental rights that belong to each individual as a human individual, that they are not given, but whose implications should be carried out. They are demands related to the preconditions affording each individual the possibility to develop his human potentialities. Rights such as the right to food, the right to health, the right to education are this kind of rights. The difficulty with such rights is that their fulfillment is dependent on other rights, rights of another kind, that can be protected only indirectly. Through other given rights to individuals by the state, through social, economic, and political rights, and through public institutions and organizations founded, not always, but mostly by political decisions. In opposition to the first group of human rights, the protection of these human rights does not depend directly to individuals, but on the social arrangements made and the political decisions taken in a country, not to forget by individuals. They can be protected, that is fulfilled for the individuals in a country, only through given rights, the limits of which may be drawn in different proportions according to the existing conditions of the country. What makes the limits drawn to these rights to protect or not protect the human rights of which they are the means depends on whether these limits are drawn with respect of the equality of the citizens in a country. For these are rights in which all citizens are equal, in spite of the fact that they are means to protect the rights in which all human beings are equal. These social and economic rights cannot be protected, but only given, or taken, as many people like to say. Where such given rights are equally shared by all citizens concerned, some rights are protected. To speak of the protection of such a right is meaningful only in connection with individuals or groups of individuals, and would mean to take it also for them. To make it also for them possible to take their portion as citizens from the given right, which will make also for them possible to develop their potentialities as human beings. This chain dependence of the rights of individuals is a dependence from the perspective of the individual, but not dependence of demands among themselves. So the protection of no human right or group of human rights can be postponed in favor of another group of rights in a country, since we are not creating the world right this moment. Dear friends, now when we conceive of human rights as demands to protect human potentialities in individuals, that is, as practical principles demanding that no human being be directly or indirectly hindered in developing his human potentialities, any argument in favor of the restriction of human rights, and also any argument in favor of not restricting social and economic rights according to the existing conditions on the basis of the principle of equality of all citizens, amounts to close one's science in front of individual or classes, each running after its own interests and clashing with the other. It amounts today to close one's eyes in front of exploitation and terrorism. Thus, the first prerequisite for the promotion of human rights seems a clear conception of the essence of human rights and of the content of each individual right, clear enough to allow us to see its full implications. A second prerequisite is sufficient courage to declare each one of us as human, to declare us as human to ourselves, which amounts to bear and carry out the responsibilities which such a declaration involves for us as individuals and as humanity. Thus, the question of the protection of human rights appears as a philosophical, ethical, and political question. It is philosophical, for we badly need the clarification of concepts of human rights, which will enable us to arrive to more certain conclusions about their implications. For example, to choose herd community is a way to fight against the pandemic. Witness to this need. The protection of human rights is also an ethical question. It is ethical, for in everyday life, individuals are those who respect or violate these rights. Individuals are those who contribute to their protection by their votes or by the decisions while carrying out their public functions. It is also a political question, for it is the task of each state to provide the conditions which directly or indirectly make possible for all its citizens to develop their human potentialities and live far from fear and want. But states are also governed by individuals. So, we see that the protection of human rights as an ethical and political question is also related to philosophy and to philosophical education. For one of the main functions of this education is to train people as early as possible in acquiring an able aid to discern where human dignity is at stake. The problems we as humanity face today, with regard to particular instances of violation of human rights, make necessary to revise and elucidate all concepts and principles in connection with human rights. This will enable us not only to revise misleading interpretation of political principles, in which governments take refuge in order to avoid being accused either of violations or of indifference at the fulfillment of human rights, but also to shape new concepts and deduce new principles in politics for the protection of human rights. To deal with the concept of human rights is philosophy's job, as well as it is philosophy's job to fight against the exploitation of dangerous concepts. We have to base the education of human rights on such an approach.